This rather neat little device you see on the desk in front of me is an RM-NB200 laptop from 1993. Now, if you're a British person of a certain age, you'll no doubt have fond memories of RM or research machines as a brand. Founded back in 1973 in Oxford, they're perhaps best known for their 380Z CP/M machines from the late 70s, and of course the iconic Nimbus from the 80s, which many of us, myself included, remember using in our primary schools way back in the day, and is noteworthy for the fact that it was one of the only consumer PCs to use Intel's 80186 CPU. So there you go, fascinating RM fact there. But unlike the 380Z and the Nimbus, this wasn't actually made in-house by RM. No, you see, this is actually a rebranded Siemens Nixdorf PCD2N and was also sold under the ICL, Packard Bell and Targa brands, according to thenimbus.co.uk, which is where I sourced a lot of the information that I'm going to be imparting upon you in this video. So thank you ever so much for putting that out there. And of course, I'll put a link to that down in the description so you can check out that website at your leisure. With that in mind, you would think it would be easy enough to find information on this specific machine, but unfortunately, apart from the aforementioned website, I haven't really been able to find much at all. For example, I can see that it uses some kind of strange 3-pin power connector, and thanks to the nimbus.co.uk, I can see that it's some kind of unusual dual voltage setup, but I haven't been able to find the pinout, so of course I don't want to go plugging stuff into this willy-nilly in case I blow it up. Then, of course, there's the question of the specs. Is it a 286? Is it a 386? How much RAM does it have installed? What's the hard drive capacity? Does it have the optional coprocessor? I have absolutely no idea whatsoever. So I thought, for this video, what we would do is take a look around the outside of this thing and see what it's all about, tear it down and find out what's inside it, and hopefully try to work out how to get some kind of power hooked up to it and get it actually fired up. So, let's get on with it. But first, I just want to say a very quick thank you to this channel's sponsor, PCBWay.com. Now, you may already be familiar with PCBWay thanks to their 10+ years of experience in the PCB fabrication industry. But did you know that they've also started offering additional services, including CNC machining, 3D printing and injection moulding? So if any of those are a requirement for your next project, please do check out the link to PCBWay down in the description. And once more, big thank you to PCBWay.com for sponsoring this video. Now, back to the laptop. Right, now just before we get stuck into this hardware, let's have a look around the outside and see what we can see. So first up, if I open up the lid, we can see that this has a pretty sizable screen for a machine of its age, but there is a twist here. You see, according to the nimbus.co.uk once more, this is a 640 by 480 monochrome display. So I'd be very interested to see this up and running because this should be super sharp. Of course, this doesn't have a sound card or any kind of pointing device, so no track point or touchpad or anything like that, no speakers either, but what it does have is a rather nice keyboard. There's some really nice travel to these keys, they're really nice and tactile and quite clicky as well. I was quite impressed with this keyboard, and again, I'd be very keen to try this out and do some actual typing on it. On the back, we have that 3-pin dual voltage power connector that I mentioned before, an external floppy drive connector, which is quite interesting because this machine does have an internal 3.5-inch floppy drive, a parallel port, a serial port, and some kind of proprietary expansion connector, presumably for some kind of dock. And unfortunately, this is the one protective flap that is missing from this system. But hey, the others are all here and they're all intact and they all click into place quite nicely as well. So hey, I guess we can overlook that one. On the right-hand side, we have that 3.5-inch floppy drive. Not quite sure if this is double density or high density, whether it's 720K or 1.4 megabytes. We'll try to have a look at the model number once we get inside this thing. We have the power switch, of course, as you might expect, and also 2 PS2 ports, which would traditionally be used for an external keyboard and mouse, of course. And the thing that amused me about this is that the keyboard port is actually labelled keypad. So I guess they intended for you to use that internal, very high quality keyboard and just have an external numeric keypad perhaps to the right hand side of this machine. Not quite sure if that was offered as an official option. I will have a peruse of the internet and see if I can track anything down. On the left-hand side, there is another pretty much identical flap, and this has a VGA connector on it, which is labelled CRT, which again, I think is quite quaint and quite amusing. And also we have a panel here which hasn't been punched out, so this implies that maybe this was an optional extra on these machines. And that one is labelled line and phone, so perhaps an option for some kind of internal modem. How intriguing. And just behind that is another flap which hides perhaps this laptop's greatest feature. And this is probably one of the biggest and heaviest laptop batteries I've come across in my many years of doing this. It's Sanyo branded, it's 4.8 volts, 5000 milliamp hours, and this is an absolute unit. It's a NiCad battery. I'm not even sure how I would go about trying to charge this thing or whether that would be a wise decision. And indeed, I haven't been able to find a direct replacement for this either. So I'm going to have to come up with some kind of alternative power solution. So let's get this torn down, shall we? And I have absolutely no idea how I'm going to tackle this, but looks like all of the screws that I can see are just standard Phillips screws, so hopefully that bodes quite well. Of course, these older machines being kind of bigger and less complicated than their modern counterparts. I think that goes without saying. And that's just a single Phillips screw in the bottom there. Right, okay, let's see what we can find and take the screws out, I guess. Right, so there's a strip above the keyboard here, and if I just very gently tease this out, we have two more screws under there, so I guess they're next. Aha! And we can already see something interesting here. Look at this. This is the RAM. Okay, well, I'll leave that there for now. There's something else here as well. I think this might be the BIOS. Interesting stuff. And there is a ribbon cable, so I'll just grab my tweezers. Just ease this one out, the ribbon cable for the screen. So that's another one of those ribbon cables for the keyboard. Aha. Lovely keyboard. And here we can see some more interesting gubbins. So more batteries here. I'm assuming this is for the BIOS, but yeah, seems quite substantial. What's this? 4.8 volts, 1200 milliamp hour. I guess I'm going to have to find a replacement for that. They look like standard AA NiCad cells in there, so I guess that's not too much of an issue. I'm thinking this is the hard drive in here, and this quite obviously is the floppy drive, and it looks like they're just held in by one screw in the middle. So let's get that one out. So the connectors for those are actually underneath this part, so I guess I'm going to have to get this whole screen assembly off next. Okay, very nice. So it looks like this is the power cable for the backlight for the screen. I think pink and white are pretty standard for those. So I'll just unplug that. And this other connector here actually comes directly from the battery. So we have a red and a black connector here, red and black wires. So that's looking quite hopeful for our mission to power this thing externally. Of course, we have the black wire there and the red wire there are negative and positive from the battery. That's a 4.8 volt battery, so I guess if I hook up some kind of 5 volt external power supply, maybe we'll be able to get some life out of this thing. But that's that detached there. And I think I'll leave the screen assembly as it is. There are some more screws and things in there, but I don't really need to disturb that, because what we are interested in is the actual motherboard itself, which we now have a very clear view of. So let's remove this battery, get that out of the way, and perhaps zoom in a bit closer on this. Okay, so let's get a bit of a closer look at this and see what we can see. So let's remove these RAM modules first, because they look really interesting. I haven't actually seen RAM like this before. I think these are SIP modules, are they? I've read about these, and I think I have seen them in one of the system, but yeah, this is much older than the stuff that I usually work on. And we have, these are 256K chips here, and we have 8 on this board and 8 on the other, so 16 in total, which is going to make for, of course, they're killer bits, so that's what, 2 megabytes of RAM in total, something like that, which is probably about right, probably indicative of a 286 system. Yeah, I've never seen modules like this before. These are really cool. Yeah, very cool indeed. And it looks like, yeah, wow, so that's the BIOS chip, which apparently is also removable for some reason. Just slots in next to the RAM, so that's quite interesting. That's just a standard EEPROM chip on there. What a nice little module that is. And of course, this is all accessible without having to strip it down this far. We could have just taken the that top flap off and just upgraded the RAM that way, which is very nice accessible design. What else can I see in here? This is a Dallas real-time clock chip. So this is the actual, this actually saves the system time, the time of day. And if you've not come across one of these before, it actually has a clock chip and a battery inside it as well, which will more than likely also be dead, I think. Bit unusual with that separate CMOS battery as well. Not quite sure. Maybe that's not a Dallas chip. I'm not quite sure. I'll have to have a closer look at that. Ah, yes it is, yeah, a Dallas DS1287 real-time clock chip. So yeah, yet another battery in this system. It looks like this board handles power-related duties. So of course we've got that, we've got the power switch itself just there, the power connector, the connector for the battery, for that CMOS battery as well, and of course the output for the backlight. Look at that, wow, look at those bodge wires. They're evidently carrying some current across that board there. They're really cool to see that, and a bit of glue as well, a bit of hot glue holding it all together. I wouldn't expect any less. And this is our floppy drive. So that's a Sony MPF 220-01. There's the label on the bottom of that. Let's just do a very quick Google of that. And yeah, apparently that is a 1.44 megabyte floppy drive, and it's a Sony as well, so that's nice. Quite a high quality drive. I bet that probably still works. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? And this is our hard drive. How interesting. Gonna have to be very, very careful with this ribbon cable here, because this looks quite fragile. How interesting. Look at that. That's really cool. So, Connor Peripherals, CP 2024. Yeah, I don't think I can really glean anything from that information there. There's no capacity printed on there or anything like that. Again, let's consult Google. 20 megabytes, I think. Looks like that might be a 20 megabyte, 2.5-inch drive. That is so cool. Look at it, it's so thick. It's a chunky boy. And finally, the main event, our motherboard here. Look at this. It's kind of quite complex and yet quite beautifully simple all at once, isn't it? Yeah, it's really nice design, that is. So yeah, this is our CPU here. So it is indeed a 286 manufactured by Harris. And yeah, we have the slot for that coprocessor here. This was marked on the bottom as, you know, it had a marking to indicate as to whether the optional coprocessor was installed. And it looks like this slot is empty. So I believe this is for a 287 maths coprocessor. So I think I have some of those actually. I have to see if I can find one and slot one into that slot. Of course, the Dallas real-time clock chip, as previously mentioned, we've got this internal speaker here, which I guess is probably just a beeper. Yeah, so we've got that Cirrus Logic BIOS. Not quite sure, what are these? Chips F82C601. I think this is the VGA controller, but I can't seem to find much information on that one. Ah, interesting. So this is a Headland HT21 chipset used in this laptop, which isn't one that I'd come across before, and apparently a company that doesn't even exist anymore. So that's quite an interesting historical oddity there, isn't it? But anyway, let's see if I can put this thing back together, now I've taken it apart, and try to hook up some kind of power supply to it. And I'm back, as promised, and as you can see, I've also dimmed the studio lights for your convenience, so you can see this beautiful backlight, pretty much the only sign of life I've managed to get out of this laptop. Yes, I did come up with a bit of a ghetto power supply solution. Okay, yeah, it also does that occasionally as well. So I came up with a bit of a ghetto power supply solution. It's a DC barrel jack with a couple of crocodile clips crimped onto the end, which are clipped onto that internal battery connector. But yeah, unfortunately, this only works about half of the time. And when I say works, what I basically mean is the power lights come on, the backlight comes on, it makes a bit of a clicking noise, and that's it. No further signs of life, no hard drive activity, and no sign that it is even attempting to boot. So quite promising, I think, but yeah, unfortunately it's going to need a bit of further troubleshooting. So I'm going to make this a two-parter, and yeah, if part 2 never materializes, you'll know that I never managed to get it working. So I guess you're going to have to subscribe to find out. So if you enjoyed the video, please do give it a thumbs up. Big thanks, as always, to my supporters on Patreon, Coffee, and indeed my YouTube channel members as well. They get the videos a little bit early and also ad-free. And a big thank you to you for watching, and I'll hopefully see you next time.